Happy Sabbath. Last week, we talked about the first angel's message. And tonight we're going to continue. And this is found in 14th chapter of Revelation. Let me do a little bit of a summary. Last week, we talked about the first angel's message, like I mentioned. And the angel is symbolic and not an actual angel flying in the air with a megaphone yelling to the world. And the angel, Greek word angelos, means messenger. And in the Bible, angels often represents person. So it is God's people who are entrusted with this proclamation to the world about the everlasting gospel. And this proclamation is in a mega manner because it is for all the nations, all the tribes, all the tongues, and all the people. And this grand proclamation is to go against Satan's lies and deceptive activities that intend to pull the world into false religion and into serving the counterfeit God to continue to do evil. And the message called to fear God, meaning to seriously acknowledge God, respect Him, revere Him, fully surrendering to His will, and glorifying Him by living a life of keeping His commandment. And doing this will prevent people from falling into the satanic trickeries. Well, what if people don't heed the warning and continue to do evil? Is there consequences? Yes. Acceptance means to accept salvation through Christ and sins forgiven. Refuse is to reap the consequence and to bear one's own sins. When Jesus comes, He will dispense His reward and judgment. And those who accept His righteousness will be admitted to His kingdom. And those who prefer evil will be judged according to their sin. And this is called the pre-advent judgment, which take place before the second coming of Jesus Christ. It is different from the final judgment which take place after the millennium, after the 1,000 years we live, or the righteous lives in heaven. Final judgment is the time for final eradication of all the wicked and all the evilness, which will be discussed in chapter 20 of Revelation. Now let's read on. I will read verse 8. This is starting with the second angel's message. And another angel, a second one, follows, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. The second angel follows the first. And this shows that the two messages are related. While the first message calls the earth's people to fear and worship God, the Creator, the second message announces the fall of Babylon the Great, which is the counterfeit God, the one that made all nations drink the wine of passion of her immorality. Well, since many symbols in Revelation are mentioned somewhere else in the Bible, and we will go to the Bible and find understanding of who is Babylon and what is its relationship with God's people. Do you remember the book of Daniel? The power that oppressed God's people, the nations that captured Daniel and his friends and conquered Judah. And Babylon is also portrayed in the Old Testament as arrogant and rebellion against God. Do you remember the story of the Tower of Babel? The name Babylon came from the word Babel, meaning confusion. And furthermore, do you remember in Isaiah chapter 14, 12 to 15, that it equates Babylon with Satan and his attempt to make himself equal to God. In addition, Babylon denotes boastfulness. If we recall the expression Babylon the Great, which was a boastful claim by King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4:30. And Jeremiah also speaks of Babylon's negative influential power. He said that it's intoxicating all the earth, and that the nations have drunk of her wine, and therefore the nations are going mad. Babylon competes against God and claims to be God, and it persecutes God's people. Babylon is arrogant, is boastful, is deceptive, and influences others to the point where they are also intoxicated with evilness. It deceives men to believe in their own reasoning and system for salvation, and create barriers for others to accept the divine plan of salvation. The old Babylon in the New Old Testament was met with the announcement of divine judgment. And this end-time Babylon in Revelation will also meet its end. So who is the end-time Babylon or apostate Babylon? In Revelation, it is a satanic trinity, the sea beast and the earth beast that we talked about. The second message, the second angel's message, provides an assurance to God's people that this wicked system will not last long. And it's already fallen and will soon come to the end, just like the Babylon of the old. And the repetition of the word fallen points out that Babylon will certainly end. Let's read verse 9 to verse 11. Then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand," verse 10, "he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb." Verse 11, "And the smoke to the torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day and night, those who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name." Well, the third angel follows. His message builds on the previous two. And while the two other messages call people to fear God and worship the true God, and announces the doom of this false religion called Babylon, and the message of the third give a serious warning to those who choose to worship the beast and his image, and to receive the mark on their forehead or on their right hand, meaning to submit oneself to believe and to give allegiance to this false religious system. What is this mixture of drink in verse 10? It says, "He also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger." In ancient time, wine was often diluted with water to reduce its strength. But some people like strong drinks, so they don't dilute it, and in addition, they mix it with some herbs to increase its intoxicating strength. And drinking wine from the Lord's cup in the Old Testament is a frequent symbol of God's wrath. And the mixed and diluted wine represent God's wrath being fully executed without mercy. Let me give you an example. In Psalm 75:8, the psalmist uses metaphor to represent divine judgment. He said, "For a cup is in the hand of the Lord, and the wine foams. It is well mixed, and he pours out of this." All who worship the beast's image will receive the mark of the beast, will be tormented with eternal fire before the angel and the Lamb. And it says the smoke of the fire will ascend forever and ever. And these people will not have rest day and night. Is this literally true? And this is a very well-known image in the Bible. Fire and sulfur in the Old Testament are a symbol of judgment. And in Genesis chapter 19:24, talk about this in the events of the Sodom and Gomorrah. And the concept of eternal fire and smoke ascending forever also comes from another place, Isaiah. Isaiah prophesied that Edom would be destroyed by fire and sulfur and becomes a burning pitch. Let's read Isaiah 34:9-10. "It will not be quenched day and night. Its smoke will go up forever, and it will never rise again from its ruins." Also Jude, the book of Jude in New Testament, described the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah as suffering the punishment of eternal fire. Well, it seems quite clear that these texts do not talk about endless burning. Well, neither Sodom and Gomorrah nor Edom are burning today in modern Jordan. However, the effects of the fire that destroy them last forever. They are no longer in existence. The same is true regarding the eternal fire in Revelation. It doesn't denote endless burning, but burning long enough to make the consumption complete until nothing is left to burn. And this usage of dramatic, vivid language in the third angel's message is intended to stir up the people's senses and to move them to stand firm in the face of Satan's end-time deception. And also so that people would render their allegiance to the true God instead of the counterfeit God. As the terrifying beast in Revelation 13, using fear to compel the world's people to choose false religion and receive the mark of the beast, Revelation here also uses even a stronger, fearful language to dispel that fear. Jesus said there is something greater to fear. He said, "Do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul. But fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." This is in Matthew 10:28. So those who respond to the call and choose God can escape the fate of the satanic trinity and their followers. Verse 12. Here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. Verse 13. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow with them. The three angels' message conclude with a positive statement. It points to the saints' endurance, and these saints are entrusted with preaching the end-time gospel. And these are the same people spoken in Revelation chapter 12:17, who are the object of Satan's furious rage and attack. And they're characterized by their unswerving faithfulness to Christ and to keeping God's commandments. The word here is the perseverance of the saints, shows their endurance is primary because of their loyalty to God and also the faithfulness in preaching the end-time gospel to counteract Satan's deceptive activities. In verse 13, these saints are promised that if they suffer physical hardship and persecution, even to the point of death, they will receive rest. And they will rest from their labor, and their good work will follow them and will not be forgotten. And this promise contrasts with a threat to those who worship the beast and receive the mark of the beast, and they will never have rest, as mentioned in verse 11. And the eternal destiny of God's people is secure with Christ, who promised to be with them always until the very end of the age, in Matthew 28:20. And when the end-time gospel preaching is finished and the pre-advent judgment is concluded, the destiny of every person will be decided. And the following verses describe the great difference of rewards between those who had a relationship with God and those who follow the beast, portrayed in terms of two harvests, a wheat harvest or the grape harvest. And you will see another set of 3 angels appear on the scene, coming from the temple in heaven to gather the wheat into the storehouse and the grapes to be trodden in the wine press. Let's read verse 14. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and sitting on the cloud was one like the Son of Man, having a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle on his hand. Verse 15. And another angel came out of the temple, crying out with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. Verse 16. Then he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. John sees a cloud, and on it sit one who looks like the Son of Man. And there's no doubt that it is Jesus Christ. And Jesus also described himself as the Son of Man in Matthew 24:30. And also Revelation 1:7, John described him as the Son of Man. And the preaching of the gospel has ended. The intercession in heaven has been concluded, and the destiny of every person is decided. Christ is now about to bring judgment upon the earth. He wears the crown of victory, the Stephanos, on his head, and in his hand he has a sharp sickle to reap the harvest. As Jesus said, when the grain is ripe, God immediately sends a sickle because the harvest is ready in Mark 4:29. He also made clear that this harvest would take place at the end of this earth history. You can look that in Matthew 13:39. Here is a symbolic portrayal of a great gathering of God's people at the end of this earth history. The sealing of God's people is done. The harvest time is here. And Jesus explained that the reapers are angels. In Matthew 13:39, you remember Jesus' parable. You can go back there and take a look. And before Christ comes, he will send his angels to gather his elect from all parts of the earth and store them in his barn. This is Matthew 13:30 to 31. And these gathered saints are the 144,000. They are also called the first fruits of the harvest. And they are pictured in Revelation 15 as being in the presence of God and as securely protected from harm of the seventh plague. And they are about to experience the transformation of their mortal body and be joined by the resurrected saints. And then they will be taken in the air to meet Jesus, who is coming in power and glory. Verse 17, 18, 19, and 20. And another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he also has a sharp sickle. 18. And then another angel, the one who has the power over fire, came out from the altar, and he called with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, Put in your sharp sickle, and gather the cluster from the vine of the earth, because her grapes are ripe. 19. So the angel swung his sickle to the earth, and gathered the cluster from the vine of the earth, and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. 20. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came out from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia. Wow. What a picture to behold. A lot of symbols. Two harvests here. The wheat or grain harvest is followed by the grape harvest. You see another angel coming from the temple, indicating coming from the presence of God, with a sharp sickle. And then an angel who has authority over fire also coming out, but this one comes from the altar. And who is this angel over the fire? This third angel could be the one who ministered the incense in chapter 8, indicating what? Intercession in heaven is finished. The examination of each person's record is concluded. And this third angel is now given a signal to the second angel who has a sickle to swing the sickle and to gather the cluster, for the grapes are ripe. So this angel swings the sickle and places the grapes into the winepress of God's wrath to be crushed. And the grapes are trodden outside the New Jerusalem. It is trodden not inside the New Jerusalem, because in this city nothing unclean can enter. And bloods come from the winepress, rising to the horses' bridles and flowing for 1,600 stadia, which is equivalent to 184 miles. This is symbolic, of course. The symbolic meaning of this number is obtained by 4 times 400. So in the Bible, 4 is the number of the world. It is described as the 4 corners of the earth in Revelation 7:1 and Revelation 28. And it also describes as 4 winds of the earth in Matthew 24:31, and also 4 quarters of the earth in Isaiah 11:12. So this hyperbolical, exaggerated distance point to the severity and worldwide scope of God's wrath. The entire world will look like a battlefield as a result of the harm caused by this 7 last plague. And trampling of the grapes is described in in Revelation 15 and 16, and it is poured out during this last 7 plague. Hyperbole and vivid language is used here. It is to warn those who read Revelation about how serious the choice they make is. The purpose of this impressive picture is to drive out the fear and the threat of the beast and the false prophet by a stronger fear. The fear is that the day is coming when mercy will no longer be available. Probation closed. Final thought. Revelation 14 is of special significance for God's faithful people living in the closing days of Earth's history. Before the end comes and probation closes, God's people are commissioned with a proclamation of this everlasting gospel. And it is the same gospel that Paul preached. And it is about Jesus Christ, the one who died, the one who resurrected, and now is sitting in the heavenly throne at the right hand of God the Father. And he will bring history of this world to its end. Can we, his people, accomplish this mega task? Christ has promised to be with his people always, even to the end of the age. Matthew 28:20. The fact that the angel from heaven rather than human being are mentioned as the one preaching to the inhabitants of the earth suggests strongly that the final proclamation of the everlasting gospel will be brought to its completion primarily by divine action, the Holy Spirit, rather than by human wisdom, efforts, skills, and method. What is our task then? Our main task is remain faithful to him and to preach this everlasting gospel by the power of the Holy Spirit, to lift up Christ and his cross as the good news of grace and pardon. Jesus is coming soon.